have described the Nigerian leadership as a coalition of elite syndicates.
Yes.
Syndicates.
Yes.
Nkrumah was overthrown by the military in 1966. What then happened to that education system he created?
Who were dedicated? You entered Ghanaian secondary schools, primary schools, and you knew the teachers were well trained. African personality, in my view, it's a question of, it's a mental construct. And be Ademola, they will say his name is John. And I ask a question, what percentage of the Chinese go around Benny John Thomas as a name?
What determines the personality? Is it not the environment, the culture?
Those days, adopting Western lifestyle was seen as superior, ignorantly. So if a teacher came in starch shirt and he wore his khaki and he did it and he did that and they gave you free food, there was a tendency to soften you, and many people were taken aback.
At what point did you have to leave Ghana? The schools were supposed to allow you in
free of charge.
So the school began to demand for school fees.
And we were giving corporal punishment for not paying. Which rational state goes into election when the country is breaking up along the seams?
Are you sure Kwame Nkrumah was not ready to use violence to spread his message? Bacha a dictator?
Nigeria is held together by corruption. The day you remove corruption from this country will come collapsing.
My guest is a Pan-Africanist, and he has written a book on the subject. Remember, Kwame Nkrumah's speech at Ghana's independence in 1957 explained his vision of Africa. In a moving oration, Nkrumah talked about reshaping the destiny of his country in the brotherhood of Africa, meaning that Ghana's progress was dependent on the progress of the African continent. He promised in that speech that Africans will sleep no more. He called it a new Africa ready to fight its own battle. He calls it an Africa ready to prove that when given the chance, the African can create his own personality and identity. Let's listen to that speech by Kwame Nkrumah in 1957.
It doesn't matter how far my eye goes, I can see that you are here in your millions. And my last warning to you is that you ought to stand firm behind us, so that we can prove to the world that when the African is given a chance, he can show to the world that he's somebody. We are awakening. We shall no more go back to sleep anymore. Today, from now on, there is a new African in the world. That new African is ready to fight his own battle and show that, after all, the black man is capable of managing his own affairs. We are going to demonstrate to the world, to the other nations, young as we are, that we are prepared to lay our own foundation. As I said in the assembly just minutes ago, I made it point that we are going to see that we create our own African personality and identity. This is the only way in which we can show the world that we are ready for our own battle. We have done the battle, and we again rededicate ourselves not only in the struggle to emancipate other territories in Africa. Our independence is meaningless unless it is linked up with the total liberation of the African continent.
That was Kwame Nkrumah in 1957. Professor Ademola Araoye, it's good to have you on State Affairs.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
You heard that speech by Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes.
How does it make you feel?
Well, actually, if you look closely into my eyes, you see I'm a little getting very, very, very emotional about it. I was born in Ghana. I'm benefited tremendously from the largesse of Kwame Nkrumah and his big-heartedness for the whole of Africa and Africans.
You say big-heartedness.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, the latitude that Kwame Nkrumah offered Africa in his vision is incomparable. And there have been many of us silently who have benefited from this largesse, like having free education, being given free health services, even when we were not Ghanaians. When we were not Ghanaians, when we were Malians, when we were Sierra Leoneans, when we were Cameroonians in Ghana, it didn't make a difference.
Can you give me details of how this happened?
Yes, I was born in Ghana in 1953. And Ghana had its independence on 6th of March 1957. That meant that by October 1st, when Nigeria got its independence, I was already 7 years old. I enjoyed the euphoria and the hope of a new beginning for Africa because I was in Ghana then. And the air was full of the optimism and the hope that Nkrumah had generated for the future of Africa. But getting to Nigeria, I realized that there was a big contrast between that hope and the reality of the African state.
You were born in Ghana.
Yes, I was born in Ghana.
So, at some point, you had to go to school.
Yes.
What was the procedure of getting into school at that time?
Well, in Ghana, first and foremost, under Kwame Nkrumah, school was virtually free. You were encouraged to go to school. Well, there was some sort of subtle compulsion to go into school. So I did my primary school in Ghana at the Akotia Roman Catholic Primary School free of charge. I attended Akotia Roman Catholic Middle School free of charge. But in September 1966, I got admitted to Ghana Secondary School, Koforidua. And let me highlight, Ghana Secondary School is one of the Ghana Educational Trust Funds built by what we call the GET schools, built by Kwame Nkrumah, which was designed to provide education to all who stayed in Ghana, who had a black skin and who was in Ghana. And secondly, it was also consciously designed to integrate the country. And people from the north of Ghana, who were a little slack with Western civilization at that time, were all brought into the GET schools and molded into Ghanaian citizenship. So that's why today you go to Ghana, there are no divisions, no tribal divisions, ethnic divisions. No, there are none. Whether you are from Ghana, from Mamprusi, or you are from Cape Coast in Ghana, or you are from Accra, or you have come from Akwetia, where I was born, you are a Ghanaian. A Ghanaian is a Ghanaian.
So Kwame Nkrumah deliberately structured Ghana to believe in itself. No tribalism. It is one Ghana.
Yeah, no tribalism, one Ghana. And in fact, not just one Ghana, one Africa.
Now, those schools admitted other Africans.
If you had a black skin, you had free access to Ghanaian schools.
Free access.
Free access.
No segregation.
No unencumbered, entrance. You just got in. You had a black skin and you were qualified. The only parameter was being qualified because Ghana, he pursued excellence, even where he had his populist vision for Ghana and Africa. Kwame Nkrumah pursued excellence.
Excellence.
Yes.
My guest is the author of the book, The Ghettos of Pan Africanism. Look at the book. Yes, this is the book. It is the book I have been waiting for. And the book is on my palm. Watch and see what I would do with the thoughts in this book. The Pan-Africanism inscribed on the front page of this book tells a deep story. We are unveiling the thoughts and ideas in this book. And Kwame Nkrumah is key to Pan-Africanism. And that is why Professor Araoye is on the program to tell this story. Remember, this is a class of politics and power. It's a class of history. I'm not the lecturer here. Professor Araoye is the lecturer here. I will try to ask those questions that you want to ask. So, Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown by the military in 1966. What then happened to that education system he created?
Well, the educational system Kwame Nkrumah created was solid in terms of the substantive contents of what you learned. Not only that, in the process of forging the African identity, the African personality, which was central to the vision of Kwame Nkrumah, you were also exposed to very iconic representations of his own ideas in teachers that taught you. You had people who were dedicated. You entered Ghanaian secondary schools, primary schools, and you knew the teachers were well trained. They knew what they were about. It was not a transactional professional relationship. These were dedicated icons of the vision of Nkrumah's idea of the African personality.
So this vision was pursued using education.
Yes, education became an instrument for the pursuit of the vision of Kwame Nkrumah.
Can we call this indoctrination?
Yes, well, yeah, in a sense, when you get so exposed to intense ideas, and then the environment in itself is configured to validate the ideas that you are being exposed to, you can call it a form of indoctrination. But slightly indoctrination devalues the intrinsic essence of what you are learning. The schools, the formal schools, were committed to formal education, substantive education. But you also had the other dimension of Kwame Nkrumah, which was the Ghana Young Pioneers, in which all African youths, all Ghanaian youths, and when I talk of Ghanaian youth now in quotes, all African youths were brought into, and you were indoctrinated. You learned more about the African personality. You are being infused with the confidence that you could go out in the world and make a difference. You needed to be yourself. You needed to be proud of yourself.
So, what is African personality?
The African personality, in my view, is a mental construct. Constructing a set of ideas that validate the core essences of the African, of black humanity, not as an appendage to the globe, but an integral and legitimate being within the context of the global system. So you have to contextualize it, because you have to go back to the history of where we are coming from. This is a continent that has been subdued for years, and who had been forced into the diaspora during the first, what I call the first globalization process. Globalization is not a recent phenomenon. Actually, globalization started from Africa when the Portuguese landed here. And what did they do? They devalued the essence, the core essence of black humanity, his cultural sense, his vision, his sense of himself. And what Kwame Nkrumah saw was a process of restitution, revitalization, and reaffirmation of the legitimacy of our being. That is my understanding. So that a set of certain principles which are meant to anchor the confidence of the black man, black humanity. And that's my idea of the African identity.
So talking about the African personality, sometimes I'm trying to place it. Is it the personality before the coming of the colonizers? Does personality change with time? What is wrong with the present African personality?
Yes, sir. Very good question. The African personality needs first to repudiate the distorted mindset which has been infused in him as an inferior being. And that we have to go back to a few principles, the evolution. First and foremost, the distortion of the African personality starts right from birth. Because around you, once you are born, you are assaulted, your being is assaulted with extraneous factors and forces. First, you are black, and so you are no good. 2, you worship, your understanding of the universe and your cosmology is already denied, is devalidated. So you have to be born again. And to be born again means you have to transform what you are organically into this mechanically contrived, almost distorted personality, which unfortunately also reflected in the kind of names that we bear.
Like,
rather than be Ademola, they will say his name is John. And I ask a question: what percentage of the Chinese go around bearing John Thomas as a name? What percentage of Indians go around as Grace?
Is that not tied to the Christian religion?
Yes, the Christian religion. I have nothing against the Christian religion, but I have something against the negative transformations that it imparts on the African personality. Because in the question of religiosity, the idea of being born again, which is okay, is the idea of repudiating your core essences as an African.
Is it about the African?
Yes, it is about the Africa, in the context of Africa.
But remember, in the United States and Britain, they also born again.
Well, I'm not talking in the United States.
Yes.
Let us understand that the immediate environment has constrained the black humanity in the United States or in the Caribbean from having a good understanding of who they are. They went in there as slaves, indentured workers. The environment wasn't sufficiently open enough for them to be themselves. And in certain cases, like in Haiti, they fought back.
And the point I'm also making,
yes,
that the term born again as represented by Christianity,
yes,
it's not just about the African.
Yes.
The whites, as some of us refer to them, also get born again.
Yeah, they get born again, but they are whites.
So
it doesn't basically change their personality.
But does born again has anything to do with color?
Oh yeah, it has.
I thought it's about the mind.
No, it has to do, because it is part of the instrument for the subjugation of the mental acuity of the black man. They say who you are. If you go around bearing the name James, if you go around, because the conditions for being born again is that you have to repudiate certain aspects of your core essence. You have to bear certain names.
But you still keep your African name.
No, but you have to stop. Yeah, you keep your African name.
Yes.
No. Let's put it this way. How often have you heard Jesu Bemidele instead of Shangodele? Yes, that is the reality.
What is Jesu?
There are people who bear the name Jesu Rami.
Is Jesu not God?
Who's God?
Is Shango God?
Well, we are going into serious issues around the cosmology and the understanding of the locale of the black man. Olodumare is not God, because the concept of Olodumare transcends the anthropological construction of God in the Western understandings. Yes.
So what is Olodumare?
Olodumare is a creative force which has certain attributes, transcendental attributes. It is not anthropomorphic in the sense of the white God.
Is it heavier than God, the name Olodumare?
I won't say heavier, but transcendental, more transcendental.
When you say transcendental, can you break this down?
Because you cannot with the limitations of your sense of your senses, even begin to imagine the construction of this force.
Now, you have raised some fundamental points.
Absolutely.
Because we are talking about the African personality.
The African personality is also culturally inclined, and your understanding of yourself within the cosmology your way of commuting with this Olodumare essentially is what they call idol worship.
But what determines the personality? Is it not the environment, the culture, what the person meets?
Yes. But if the environment itself has been polluted, then the product, the personality of that will emerge from that polluted environment will be distorted. And that's what we have in Africa.
So what do you mean by pollution?
Pollution, first, when somebody comes and tells you you are worshiping an idol and takes away your core understanding of the universe.
Now, if you told me and I'm worshiping an idol,
yes,
and I accept it,
yes,
and stop worshiping the idol,
yes,
do you blame the teller?
No, I don't blame the teller. I blame the laxity with which we also validate ourselves.
Now,
that should never happen.
From day one, has there been something wrong with the African personality that made it to accept everything that was put into his or her mind?
I wouldn't say there has been something wrong essentially with us, but it is just that we have been confronted with a very powerful propaganda machinery and mechanisms that only very few can resist. I mean, the negative interpretation that we are facing.
Does that explain what some have called that inferior personality?
Exactly. The essence of the environment is to degrade the very the population, the understandings of the population within that environment. If I come and I tell you you are worshiping an idol, and until you leave your idol worship, there's no room to heaven.
That means you have been brainwashed.
You have been brainwashed.
Why did you allow the brainwashing?
You are not allowing it. You become an unconscious victim of this machination by the external force, and your brainwashing is not an end in itself. You are being brainwashed to make you malleable for the order that will come.
Do you agree that the brainwasher
yes
is superiorly intelligent than the person being brainwashed?
I don't think so. I don't agree.
You don't agree?
Because the circumstances are completely different. If you are being brainwashed, look, it took so many years of over 150,000 of imperial control. So it was a subtle process. And let's start from this. In those days, adopting Western lifestyle was seen as superior, ignorantly. So if a teacher came in starch shirt and he wore his khaki and he did it and he did that and they gave you free food, there was a tendency to soften you. And many people were taken aback. I don't want to become personal in this, but note, there are very prominent families in Nigeria or in Africa whose great grandfathers accepted Western way of life unquestionably have turned back to repudiate that, to say no.
You are a core Pan-Africanist.
Thank you.
You have talked about the name.
Yes.
Was Nyerere a Pan-Africanist?
He was a Pan-Africanist to the core, Mwalimu, and that's why they call him a teacher.
He was also Julius.
Was also Julius. But if you see in the latter days of his life, he was more seen like Mwalimu Nyerere. Hardly do you hear Julius. That was suppressed. And that's part of the evolution of the mindset. Kwame Nkrumah you never heard, all you heard was Kwame Nkrumah or Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah. Yes. That is it. Compare that to people like Hufwe Boye. What is Hufwe?
Let's come back to Ghana.
Yes.
Kwame Nkrumah was overthrown.
Yes.
After he was overthrown, what happened to your education?
Oh, thank you. in the immediate years of Nkrumah's overthrow, from his legacy was so strong that you couldn't roll back the gains that Ghana had made. So the GET schools remained what they were, essentially strong educational institutions founded on merit, the pursuit and advancement of merit. And I enjoyed that tremendously. And I must also say, at this point, that my education in Ghana and the process of getting into Ghana secondary school and the experiences there actually will be the definitive force that has turned me into who I am as a passionate Pan-African. When I went to Ghana secondary school in September 1966, Ghana secondary school Koforidua, the principal was D.O.K. Dankwa. My father, I have very humble beginnings, went to school with me for the first day. He took me there from Akotia. And I had a trunk box and I had a small chop box made of wood where I put my supplementary food like everybody does, even in Nigeria. And the principal walking by, so he said to my dad, Mr. Salami, why did you buy Lasisi a small box? And my father, a humble man, was a little perturbed. And the man said, Mr. Salami, don't be worried about it. Come to my office. And then we went into the principal's office. And he brought out this sheet. He said, oh, we just received this today. And he looked, oh, I'm happy to inform you, Mr. Salami. Lasisi has been awarded the Cocoa Marketing Board scholarship. He will go to school free of charge. You are not going to pay any school fees.
Cocoa Marketing Board scholarship.
CMB scholarship in those days. And so I went through my experience at Ghana Secondary School without paying a farthing.
And that was the policy that was laid down by Kwame Nkrumah.
It didn't matter because my name was Salami or Lasisi, being Nigerian. If we had Malians, we had Cameroonians.
What mattered was that you are an African.
An African. That was what mattered. So you grew up yourself, you considered yourself a Ghanaian, but not just a Ghanaian, but an African. So my education was smooth. And I can look back on my experience with a lot of fondness. I can. And a lot of nostalgia.
So at what point did you have to leave Ghana?
And then the bogus nationalist of Dr. Kofi Abri-Fabusia came into office in 1969.
After Kwame Nkrumah was gone.
Yes. And they decided they were going to rescind all the Pan-African policies of Kwame Nkrumah. These were misguided nationalists. And so we had the aliens quit order in December 1969. And in a jiffy, all Africans became unwanted aliens in Ghana.
Alien quit order.
The aliens quit order of December 1969.
They must leave Ghana.
Everyone had to leave Ghana. Not only that, it was so bad. And when I left school, in January 1970, I left Ghana Secondary School straight in Koforidua to the seaport. And because Nigeria was going through a civil war at that time, it took a while for the government of Nigeria to arrange for boats to come and take us.
Why couldn't you go home from school?
I couldn't go home because it was a quit order. And the Ghanaians, just leave. Immediately. It wasn't even safe. Yeah.
Just like that?
Just like that. Because the environment had been poisoned.
Why that order? What was it that provoked it?
Because the pseudo-nationalists, is it the PP, Party Papa? Yes, the PP. Kwame Nkrumah was CPP, Conventions People's Party. But there was this nebulous political party that came that repudiated everything that Kwame Nkrumah stood for, including Pan-Africanism. And part of the concern was to cut down the stature of Kwame Nkrumah in the African firmament. And so, of course, having said that, earlier, yes, so in 1969, this order came and we had to leave. Some of us came back to this country, our home country. I was coming to Nigeria for the first time, my home country, with a shirt on my back.
So Ghana moved away from the pursuit of the African personality
Exactly.
to the Ghanaian personality.
Well, not even the Ghanaian personality, because then even within Ghana, there were certain controversies around the policies of Kwame Nkrumah. And that also explains why, against the pseudo-nationalists, you also have people like K.A. Gbedema, National Alliance of Liberals, who then came in to challenge the extreme conservatism of the Fabusia regime.
So the damage was now even done to the African personality.
Even within Ghana. And I also tell you, the thing has also impacted, on Ghanaians and Ghana at this point in time. I know there's a small thriving Pan-African community in Ghana that is fighting hard, but recent events are quite sad. Like the president of Ghana going to the United States and providing the itinerary of the prime minister of a neighboring state. Just for what? Just to get some old rusty military hardware.
Did you say old rusty?
Old rusty military hardware. And for that, you had to tell on your form on your African brother who is your neighbor. It's a very sad evolution.
You're making reference to Burkina Faso?
Burkina Faso? Yes.
I'm discussing with Professor Ademola Araoye, the author of The Ghettos of Pan Africanism. Lovely book. A book for the African. You can get a copy of this book on udarabooks.com. On udarabooks.com. We have not gone into the content of this book. We would go into the content. But this is just part one of an interview that will run over 5 editions. So as we go, we'll begin to make references to examples of issues in Africa. So get a copy of this book in preparation of different editions of the class. You'll get it on udarabooks.com. Prof, it's a battle of the mind, right?
Absolutely. And that's why the intellectual dimension is very important. When one talks of intellectual dimension, one is not talking of some highfalutin abstraction in the air, but issues that have concrete relevance of salience to the existential challenges that we face today all across Africa.
Kwame Nkrumah talked about the African personality.
Yes.
The African identity.
Yes.
Is there a difference? Personality, identity.
Conceptually, yes. Identity and personality. The personality is the perception of your courage. The identity relates more to your mindset, your faculties, how you visualize yourself, the locus of your being within your own understanding in the universe wherever you find yourself.
You know, I was reading Winston Churchill. He makes the point that the empires of the future are the empires of the mind.
Absolutely, he's correct.
Is the African taking close examination of his mind? Are we doing that through policy formulation, through our educational system?
Unfortunately, no. And that is actually the core issues raised by this book. The fundamental, the basics of the contemporary evolution of the African personality, the African mind, the African environment, the African economy. The bottom line is this. Pan-Africanism, maybe it's too early to go into that, but Pan-Africanism was a radical tour de force for the African Renaissance for the revalidation of the essences of the African in a changed and a hostile global universe. There's no point highlighting that we live in a universe that is hostile.
Is it hostile?
Yes.
Is it hostile to the African personality?
It absolutely.
Is it not also hostile to the Chinese personality?
No, the Chinese, it has, okay. Normally, yes, if we are going to adopt the Hobbesian scenario, it is dog eat dog. But each dog must learn to protect itself. The Chinese have protected themselves well. The Indians have protected themselves well. The Japanese have protected themselves well. Africa, unfortunately, has been prostrate.
Professor Araoye, you made the point at the acknowledgement page of this book. You said the African is culpable for the parlous state of his affairs.
Yes, absolutely.
Including you?
Well, I wouldn't consider myself as part of those. If I were, we wouldn't be having this conversation. That's the difference. But Africa has been a victim of its own negligence. That is just it.
How?
The African leader is not forged on the anvil of African existential challenges. The African leader is motivated, driven by a personal partisan agenda for self-aggrandizement. And because of that, the African leader is prepared to liaise, ally himself with the very historic traducers of his own people for as long as he can get that small cup of pottage.
And he gets it regularly, right?
He gets it regularly. And that's why the evolution of Africa up to point is so to say a constant stream of irrationality and absurdity.
Destroy the African personality, will give you loan.
Give away everything. Give away everything. And then later on we'll come to the two critical concepts of deflection and defection that are linked.
You left Ghana in 1969.
Yes.
To Nigeria.
Yes.
Nigeria was in a civil war.
Yes.
When you landed in Nigeria, what happened?
Well, we landed in Nigeria, and of course, naturally, this was during the Ghanian regime. And I want to say he was very magnanimous and very gentle, very generous in the treatment of what the people they call returnees from Ghana. You know, Abode Ghana. The government of Western region then, under Major General Ademola Araoye, was quite helpful. He arranged to pay the school fees of all of us who had just arrived in the country. Very, very desperate, distressed, disenchanted, almost alienated. But Major General Ademola Araoye was a fine leader. He provided all the resources that we needed then. But guess what? The resources never got to us. Those resources were appropriated by individuals, the agencies, the human agencies, let me say the human agencies of the institutions of education and governance or governing of those days. We never saw it. And of course, that also brings me to the influences in my life. You can compare the experience that one had in Ghana, not as a Ghanaian, but as an African living in Ghana. Scholarship, free education, treated well. And then you came to Nigeria, and suddenly you get spanked in school for school fees that have been already paid by the government.
Ademola Araoye paid the school fees.
Yes, he did.
So the schools were supposed to allow you in.
Free of charge.
So the school began to demand for school fees.
School fees. And we were given corporal punishment for not paying.
How did you know this?
Well, I don't want to name names, but when I got back to Abeokuta later, I did meet the vice principal of the school, who, as best as an elderly can apologize to a young man, said to me, all this needed not to have happened, because the Western Region government had actually made provisions for you and had paid the school fees for which you were punished.
And the leadership of the school cornered the money.
Oh, they collected the money. They collected the money.
Just like that?
Just like that. And
this was in the 70s?
Oh, this was in 1971. I'm talking of 1970, 1970.
There was corruption at that time.
Deeply entrenched.
It has always been a corrupt society.
That's been my experience of this country. That's been my experience of this country. And let me say something sacrilegious. Can I?
Go ahead. It's your view.
Nigeria is held together by corruption. The day you remove corruption from this country will come collapsing. If it is sacrilegious, yes.
Is it not unity that keeps us?
No. Which unity? We are moving towards a so-called protest in this country. What has it become? Has it not become the mutual acrimony of antagonistic ethnic nations? Are the Yorubas not pursuing, don't strike because a Yoruba man is there, and the North is saying, no, you are going, and they are saying, oh, leave Lagos, the Igbos should leave Lagos. So what kind of nation are you talking about? What kind of unity?
Is it not a nation?
No, we are not even a state.
You're not a state?
No.
Professor Araoye?
Yes, I will explain that in future sessions. There's something called deflation. What we do in Africa, we take a concept and hollow out the concept and infuse them with, their complete antagonistic, visions of what the original should be, and give it the name democracy.
Professor Araoye, you served in the foreign service.
Yes.
Of this country.
Yes, I did.
It's a state.
Well, the nominal state. Look, let me tell you this. Stephen Krasner identifies 4 levels of sovereignty which defines statehood: domestic sovereignty, international legal sovereignty, and 2 others that I can't corner. What keeps the African state, not just Nigeria, going is international legal sovereignty. I can tell you, in the last 2-3 years, how many letters have gone to the British Parliament, to the Secretary of the United Nations, denouncing this state by elements in this country who don't recognize the statehood of this country.
That is their opinion.
Yeah,
it's a state.
That is their opinion, but legitimacy arises from the opinion and the perceptions of the citizens.
It is still a legitimate state. It has a president. It has governors. It has a Supreme Court.
It has the paraphernalia of statehood.
It has the Nigerian army.
It has the paraphernalia of statehood. It has the paraphernalia of statehood.
You are of the opinion that there was no need for the 2023 election.
No. Which rational state goes into election when the country is breaking up along the seams?
Breaking up?
Yeah.
Can you break it down?
Well, when I talk of breaking up, you can't deny that there's a war going on in the southeast. Neither can you deny that you haven't been able to suppress Boko Haram. Boko Haram. You can't deny that there are people, the Fulanis, trying to create in 2023, for trying to create an indigenous land by slightly removing some people from their communities. You have over 500,000 Nigerians out there in internally displaced camps. You have some in Benin Republic. So how can you talk? What you do rationally is to sit down and x-ray these things and then determine the way forward. You had elections only because a small minority of less than 1,000 people who had the means railroaded this country into an unwanted election.
Unwanted election?
Yes. Who wanted the election? Prominent citizens of this country warned, don't go into elections. Sit down. Let's find the way out to this fundamental malignancy of the Nigerian state.
We have gone into the election. We came out successful.
Oh, well, I don't know success in quotes. How did you come back successfully? 6 months after, you were all going to court. And there are significant elements in this society that will challenge the legitimacy of the current order.
The legitimacy
of the current order.
Of the current order. You mentioned the Fulani in the middle belt of this country.
Yes.
When you mention them, does that remind you of Buhari?
Of course. If there's any one single individual who personifies the challenge of Nigerian statehood, it is Buhari. When one man takes 95% of all the projects meant for his part, takes it to his country. When your president goes to the Secretary General to say, well, anytime you want to bring any interventions into Nigeria, please take it to my area. When a man, without the consent of the National Assembly, decides to build a modern, expensive railroad from the north to Maradi in Niger Republic, what is he doing? As a Pan-Africanist, I wouldn't worry about that, but the process is very important.
Look, I was going to ask you, is that not Pan-Africanism?
Exactly. The process,
that is brotherhood.
Yeah, but the process of the brotherhood, you do not undertake these kind of things without going through the appropriate. So there's transparency. And what has happened? That also goes to the heart of African statehood. African statehood is about holistic appropriation by the most powerful force.
You have described the Nigerian leadership as a coalition of elite syndicates.
Yes.
Syndicates.
Yes.
Break it down.
Look at it. I don't want to put into trouble by mentioning names, but look at the profile of your public space. Those who control your public space. Look at the profile and tell me whether this is not a syndicate.
What makes it a syndicate?
That's why I already said so. Corruption is what is holding this country together. It is the core glue. It is the glue that is holding the leadership across the nation together. The national elite standing together.
Corruption must be a good thing to keep a country together.
I don't know whether it's a good thing, but corruption is, and I said it again, if you remove corruption, Nigeria will come crashing. And I don't want to mention names. What about the young governor who was accused? What about the young what do you call a minister? All over the place. What happened?
Is Nigeria a typical representation of a poor African personality? Especially looking at the leadership cadre.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you, but you're right.
You don't think right?
Yes. I said already, it's an unending stream of irrationality and absurdities. So, but if you want to explore Nigeria through rational lenses, you're likely going to have heart attack. But if you accept the fundamental premise that it is driven by irrational and absurd considerations, then you can be at peace with yourself. And that is why, given all the situation in 2023, rather than sit down and say the welfare of this country, the longevity of this country depends on getting it right. Let's do it right. No. It is, how can I push my personal partisan agenda? And that does not reflect to one person. The political class are motivated by that, and they're motorized by that, what I call polypreneurship, political entrepreneurship.
And it underdevelops a people?
Underdevelops? That's an understatement. It destroys the whole essence of a people.
So are we going through gradual destruction?
Yes, gradual destruction, yes. But unfortunately, we are going to a potential catastrophic situation, which all good-hearted men must do everything to stop, to halt.
The consequences are the things we see in the southeast in unknown gunmen.
Already, in Biafra.
Marauding bandits in the middle belt.
Biafra. I'm talking the other day, a group of people went and flew a flag, the Yoruba nation flag. Isn't that enough? You think you solve the problem by just arresting 2 or 3 people and putting them in jail? You need to sit down and renegotiate the terms of your longevity. It is very important because you cannot hand over this wobbly contrivance to the future.
This renegotiation you are talking about, are you also considering to your tent to all Israel?
Well, I do know that there are three how do I call it now? Three planks. They are those who want the status quo to remain. Basically, the polypreneurs, the political entrepreneurs. That's what they eat by. They are those kind-hearted men who are saying no. Let's restructure. And of course, you also have those who say no. You see Biafra, you see Yoruba Nation, who are saying we need to sit down and renegotiate the terms of.
Does Pan-Africanism accommodate these borders, these European borders? I thought it should break the borders.
See, we are also living in interesting times. See what is happening in the Sahel.
Yeah?
There is a difference between what you see in the Sahel and what happened in 1963. In 1963, in Addis Ababa, the heads of states went back home happy that they have been able to sustain themselves as presidents. And what happened? We ended up with dynastic successions. Dynasties. Togo. Yadema, yes. Now, but what are you saying in the Sahel? Countries have come out to, on their own, say, look, these small enclaves you have, it's not working, are not working. Let's have a big confederal state of the Sahel.
You are talking of the military states of Niger, Burkina Faso,
I won't call them a military state.
Mali.
I will call them the revolutionary states.
Revolutionary?
Yes.
Was Araoye revolutionary?
Yes, they are. Because the revolutionaries is anyone who repudiates the status quo is a revolutionary.
Professor Araoye, are you talking about coupists?
You can call it coupists.
The coupists that removed your man Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana?
Let me come. Some of the best leaders we have had in Africa, Gaddafi, he staged the coup. Right? Even the Ghana you talk about, there is Jerry Rawlings. I will not validate blanket coup making, but Africa is passing through an epoch where there is a need for what's the term for this? Not the reinvention, but recalibrating itself, moving away from the disastrous impact of neo-colonial experience, where there is no and then also there is no real democracy. You don't have authentic democracy in Africa. You have instrumentalized democracy. Democracy instrumentalized at 2 levels. The level of the polypreneurs, political entrepreneurs, who have what I call, who have emptied, vacated authentic democratic practice with their own version of democracy that is convenient to them. And then they say, we have democracy. And then they do in alliance with external forces, neo-colonial forces, neo-imperialist states that align with them to ensure that everything is fine. That is it. So you don't have any democracy.
So you feel what is going on, the alliance of Sahel states?
Oh, it's a positive development.
It's a positive development.
Oh, it is a positive development.
They are confronting ECOWAS.
So, okay, yeah. They are confronting, what ECOWAS are they confronting?
For they are confronting Nigeria.
They are not confronting Nigeria. ECOWAS confronted them.
And they reacted.
No, ECOWAS confronted them. And that's why we say ECOWAS mismanaged the situation because they didn't have a proper understanding of the historical evolution of where they were. Right now, how much was uranium costing? How much was Union Minière of France paying Niger for their uranium? Now the price that they have 400% fold. That's what Niger is getting.
I want to read from your book.
Yes.
On page 14, You said, as currently constructed,
Yes.
Africa cannot develop a meaningful continental will.
No, it cannot.
It is against the background of a politically divided and weak Africa that Africa was treated as a tangential player in the crisis and conflict in Cote d'Ivoire, Libya, and even in the Central African Republic.
Yes.
Also, against the stout opposition of Africa, the Pan-Africanist Laurent Gbagbo was unfairly hauled to the International Criminal Court.
Yes.
You say here that in the Central African Republic, Gabon, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Cote d'Ivoire, Cameroon, Mali, etc., France continues to direct not only the political trajectory, but also the economic policies of Francophone Africa. Has France been dealt a heavy blow in Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali?
Absolutely. And I also predict it's just the beginning.
You wrote this book, you published this book in 2020.
Oh yeah, 2020, before we got here, yeah.
Yes, and now we can see what is going on.
Exactly.
So that's the work of an intellectual.
Thank you very much.
You can project.
Thank you.
You can see the future.
Thank you.
But are you seeing the consequences of bringing Russia into the system?
Whatever the consequences of the presence of Russia, China, and all that, it doesn't matter. Africa is a part of the global system, and there should be no reason why Africa should be fixated and permanently aligned to its own Western its traducers from Western Europe. I have nothing against Western Europe, but if Western Europe could come and exploit us, if the Russians come and we get a better bargain, or the Chinese come and we get a better bargain, what's the problem? What's the problem?
Nigeria is opposing the alliance by Sahelian states. Nigeria opposed Kwame Nkrumah's ideal.
It did.
The Monrovia bloc versus the Liberian bloc. What was it that Nigeria didn't like?
Well, those in the colleges of power will know what they don't like. But even after that, Nigeria was supportive of Alassane Ouattara, a proxy of France. And how were we paid back? Ouattara derailed the launching of the West African ECO, championed by ECOWAS.
Serves Nigeria right.
Yeah. Exactly.
And you feel Gbagbo was a good man.
Oh, excellent. History. Gbagbo remains an icon of African integrity.
How?
There's one thing. The first thing we accuse every African leader of is corruption. How much has been traced to Gbagbo outside the confines of Cote d'Ivoire? Nothing. Nil. Zilch. Nothing.
He caused war in Cote d'Ivoire.
He didn't cause war.
He worked against democracy.
No.
He didn't want to relinquish power.
That is the narrative.
Okay.
That is bandied about.
What is the narrative?
The narrative that I know, and I was in Cote d'Ivoire, the war was instigated by France through Burkina Faso under Blaise Compaoré. Okay? And the first novel that attacked Laurent Gbagbo were basically mostly 90% Burkina-based. As far as I know, Alassane Ouattara started life as a Burkinabe.
Was he born there?
He was not born there.
He was born in Cote d'Ivoire.
Well, as far as I know, when he was in the United States as a student, he held Burkinabe passport. And in fact, the ambassador of Cote d'Ivoire then invited him. He refused. He said he preferred his Burkinabe citizenship. But later, when Houphouët-Boigny brought him as prime minister, and for another reason, The sole reason why Alassane Ouattara was made prime minister then, which was unconstitutional, was because Houphouët-Boigny wanted his godson, Bédié, Konan Bédié, late boy Konan Bédié, who was the president of the legislature, to take over in the case of his demise, in the case of his death. So he needed to take a non-Ivorian who could not contest the presidency to pave the way for his godson, Konan Bédié, also a Baoulé. You get it? Now, but Alassane Ouattara played very fast. He then said, if I've been the prime minister, in fact, it is also on record, when he applied to be an Ivorian citizen and he submitted it to Houphouët-Boigny, Houphouët-Boigny never signed that document until he passed. And of course, if you look at Francophone countries at that point in time, they always brought in ministers from across Francophone states. They did. So it wasn't unique to Cote d'Ivoire. But we all know, finally now, what he is. When Alassane Ouattara took over power in Cote d'Ivoire, within the first 6 months, he paid France over $3 billion. Within 6 months. So he didn't go through due process. What was he paying for? He was paying for French investment in the first novel. And of course, that same Alassane Ouattara, if you said Gbagbo was a six-state government, well, at least we now know Alassane Ouattara changed the constitution and kept himself in power. Not only that, the Secretary General of the First Novel is now a wanted man in Abidjan who is hiding in France.
Gbagbo is back.
Gbagbo is back.
Back from prison.
Mm-hmm.
He's in Cote d'Ivoire.
Yes.
And he's still interested in political power.
Yes.
Shouldn't he go home and rest?
Well, when you have the kind of zeal he has for Pan-Africanism, and you are determined at your age, you sacrifice anything, whatever it takes, for you to take the mantle to actualize your vision.
Are there Pan-Africanist leader that you admire at the moment in Africa?
I do. Gbagbo.
Gbagbo?
Yes. I admire him because I know him.
You know any in Nigeria?
Well, the only person you can talk of is late Obafemi Awolowo.
The only person you can talk of?
Maybe Aminu Kano, who was more populist than Pan-Africanist. But if you are talking of the core Pan-Africanists, you are talking of people like Awolowo and Enahoro and co. And of course, you know that the alliance or the alignment of Obafemi Awolowo with Kwame Nkrumah was central to his sentences to jail in Nigeria because he was accused of planning a coup through the instrumentality of Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah.
Do you believe he planned a coup?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Are you sure Kwame Nkrumah was not ready to use violence to spread his message?
I wouldn't go into that, but I do know that Kwame Nkrumah did start the nucleus of Ghana, Guinea, Mali, which was supposed to be the nucleus of a federation, and in that sense, there was no violence involved.
Is anything wrong with violence in spreading a good cause?
Oh, there is. I have everything against violence in spreading a good cause, but revolutionaries determine what is the best instrument they want to deploy.
In Burkina Faso, in Mali, they are using violence, is it not?
I don't know the details. But I haven't seen any evidence to suggest that they massacred people. No.
In this book, you referred to Africa as the depraved African universe.
Oh, that's what it is.
You talked about depreciated humanity in a hostile global universe.
Yes, that's what it is.
And you said official narratives are not in sync with the experienced reality.
Exactly.
You speak now as a UN worker, right?
No, I'm not speaking as a UN worker. No,
where did you get the idea from? Somehow
I got the ideas from my own, from the empirical evidence I had on ground.
You worked with the United Nations.
I wouldn't want to bring the United Nations into this. They got nothing to do. And if the book I wrote as the United Nations, you will see at the back, this thing does not represent the opinion of the earlier books.
So when you say experienced reality, what are you talking about?
The existential facts, what you see on ground, the narratives. You see, that also goes to another issue of the narratives of Africa, where people project, they say Afro optimism. That when you give the narrative of Africa as an African, you should paint an optimistic picture. But some of us said no, decline. Post an Afro-realistic picture. Realism. What is on ground? What are the facts on ground? What are the true existential conditions of the African humanity?
Is something wrong with the African?
I wouldn't say there's something wrong with the African. I've said that the conditioning, the environmental condition of the African puts him at a great disadvantage.
Is the environment not the person?
The environment is not completely the person. The environment has a lot of influence on the person. But there's also the innate ability of each and everyone to cultivate rigorous approaches to the interpretation of the facts that you see.
Because I have made the point that if you change the environment, you change the person.
Exactly, you do.
So the environment is the person.
The environment is not the person. The environment is a critical element in the construction of the personality. But it is not completely. It is not completely the environment.
So if we want to change the person, and by implication the environment, what should we look at? Is it education?
When we talk of environment, education is very important. Formal education. But the formal education itself does not constitute the environment. You can have, look, in this country, for example, no matter what they teach you when you are going to your formal education, the reality is that the reality of the Nigerian environment impinges on you. It does. It does.
So the reality is different from the educational system.
The educational system is part of the reality, but then you have to weigh it. What we call what we probably call the explanatory capacity of the elements. The environment may have a strong, let's say about 70% of the explanatory capacity of the kind of personality that emerges from that environment. But that environment too may also have certain redeeming elements. Like if you go to certain caliber of schools, certain kinds of schools, you are likely to cultivate very capacity for rigorous thinking. Perhaps the environment has 70% of the explanatory capacity of the personality that emerges from that environment. But having said that, there are other factors. And even the environment is not always homogeneous. The environment is not homogeneous. If you come from a home where your father is a thief, and he has inculcated in you the need to cut corners before you can get along, then there's nothing you can do about that. You are going to produce degenerate a thief.
So is that what society is paying for? When the leadership is constituted by characters that are lying towards criminality,
yes,
what happens to the general public?
You see, that criminality, the impact of that criminality, unbridled criminality, is that the society is shortchanged. The commonwealth is completely appropriated. And that's what you see all over Africa.
So can we say that the character of leadership at any time is the dominant character of the state?
Yes, it drives the state. It drives the state. The leadership is key. Leadership is key. But leadership itself is part of the elements within the environment that we are talking about.
You know, sometimes I sit back and I'm wondering, why did the Nkrumahs not save Africa, despite the knowledge they had? Why did Awolowo wait to be sent to prison? He really reigned in Tanzania. Mwalimu reigned in Tanzania. But Tanzania is an underdeveloped African state.
Then, they have made significant progress.
Is that an advanced state?
Well, advanced is relative too. That is it.
Compared to South Korea?
No, definitely not along those lines. So,
the Asian tigers rose. South Korea, Taiwan, even China reigns as we speak.
Yeah.
You know, Mao Zedong. What is wrong with Africans?
Yeah, we have to go to the fundamentals of African statehood, it's challenging.
Remember, Japan colonized Korea for more than 30 years.
There's a difference between Japan and us. That is where the personality comes in. There's the personality of the Japanese personality has survived all the tribulations of time in a manner that we have not. That's another different question altogether.
Can you compare their tribulation to what happened to Africa? The transatlantic slave trade.
The Chinese also created some havoc in Japan, although Japan itself also created havoc in China.
Yes.
Have you heard of the rape of Nanking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are. It's not a one way route. It's what do I call it now? An interactive process to find there. But the bottom line is that you can isolate these personalities from the African personality. The Indians. Today, India controls the economy of the world. 80% of all the multinationals and all that are headed by Indians. Period.
So why are we not there? This African personality, can't we?
I can understand your frustration, and I can understand the need for us to explore this subject.
Look at South Africa. Mm-hmm. At some point, you lectured in South Africa.
Yes.
The whites fared better in terms of development compared to the blacks at the moment. Do you agree?
Well, because basically South Africa had to negotiate the end of apartheid. And the negotiations were such that if you didn't make certain commitments, certain compromises, you were not going to get post-liberation South Africa. And so Nelson Mandela wisely decided to compromise in order to be able to build a future, an inclusive future, an integrated future of the whole of South Africa. But then that also explains the challenges that South Africa faces today. Because you now have the economic freedom fighters of Julius Malema who disagree with some of these compromises because we want the land. We want the land. We want the land. We want immediate transformation of the essential conditions of black humanity in South Africa.
We have the land in Nigeria. We have the land in Ghana. What have we done with the land?
Well, you were talking in terms of South Africa.
Yes, but I'm assuming if they got the land, what would they do with the land?
If they got the land, that's a hypothetical question now.
Robert Mugabe got the land in Zimbabwe. What happened?
Robert Mugabe got the land, but Robert Mugabe was sabotaged.
By
the West.
Why are they always sabotaged?
That's the basic question that we are
What creates that hole that leads to the sabotage?
Now, because we have said that we are weak states. If you had a continental Africa that could stand on it, first and foremost, the only way you can have a continental Africa is to begin to reject the dominance of these individuals, prominent individuals who want to stay in power.
Professor Araoye.
Yes, please.
Mao Zedong and the communists stood against the United States support of the nationalists in China.
Yes.
They engaged in a war.
Yes.
The communists defeated the nationalists.
Yes.
Mao and his guys took over China.
Yes.
The nationalists ran to the island to build Taiwan.
Yeah.
Now look at this. They fought against America. Mao launched the Cultural Revolution. China is in the sky. They were not sabotaged.
Now, you were talking of violence. I have nothing against what Mao Zedong did. But if you go into the details of the Cultural Revolution, it wasn't as pacific as we know.
Millions died.
Thank you.
Millions died in Zimbabwe. Yet Zimbabwe is poor. Millions have died in the Congo.
Yeah, millions died because we are looking at polypreneurship, political entrepreneurs. These are not. Look, let us go beyond rhetoric.
So do we need a Mao?
No, I wouldn't say we need a Mao that is going to go through it, because the sensibilities of the international community has changed. The kind of instrument that we applied in the 1940s, where the state had unlimited use of power, is no longer. The state at this point in time is no longer dependent on the unlimited use of coercion, as it was in, say, 1940 or 1930 or 1920.
You see, Prof, I was listening to the old speeches of Mugabe in the 1980s.
Yes.
I've been studying Mugabe.
Yes.
Brilliant.
Yes.
You know, I was convinced. Brilliant man.
Yes.
But getting leadership, you don't see the brilliance in policy, in development.
I agree with you. It's not only
Even Kwame Nkrumah at some point began to derail. Is that not true?
No. I wouldn't say Kwame Nkrumah began. In what sense?
Somebody like J.B. Dankwa
Look,
was kept in detention. He died in detention.
Mm-hmm. There's one thing I know. I hate to have to defend the Preventive Detention Act under which J.B. Dankwa was put in jail. I don't want to defend that. But in more recent times, there's also been people who are coming forward to tell us the details of how Kwame Nkrumah survived. Kwame Nkrumah his life was attempted several times. And so there's a sense in which I can empathize with the need to say, okay, what else can I do? Kwame Nkrumah was going to Kumasi, the heart of Ghana. He was going to use the train. And his schedule was announced. Of course, because of that, what happened? The whole journey had been booby-trapped to eliminate him. So, but he was one step wiser. I think he arrived earlier than planned. And when he left, they expected he was going back to Accra. He didn't go to Accra. He went to Cape Coast. That was how he avoided, several attempts on his life. So I can understand the desperation which probably informed the PDA, Preventive Detention Act, that led to J.P. Dankwa. But again, I wouldn't justify the use of violence or the use of this kind of oppression, in policy making. I believe that you can always resolve issues, but there must always be. It's just like you have in Nigeria. Isn't there a need to sit down and talk? Do you have to have 1,000 people died out of insurgency or what else, or secession, before you realize that there's a problem?
Is violence not a tool for peace?
No. Violence cannot.
Is it not?
No, violence cannot be a tool for peace. Violence is not a tool for peace.
Is that not why government controls the instrument of violence?
No, they control the instrument of violence to sustain themselves, to sustain their statehood. And let me also tell you, there's also a theory. Politics and government there are two things: coercion or suasion. Coercion is effective in the short term, less effective in the medium term, and disastrous in the long term. Suasion is less effective in the short term, more effective in the medium term, and excellently effective in the long term. So any state that depends on coercion, any state that depends on coercion is already delegitimized. Because legitimacy, like I was saying the other day, legitimacy is not a legal issue.
Let's end this discourse by critically looking at the call for nationwide protest. And the protest has already started in some homes somewhere. Do you think this protest is called for?
I believe if they had protested in 2023 before the elections to affirm the need for Nigeria to sit down and come to definitive understanding of the terms of their coexistence, I would have supported it. But if the fundamentals of this country remain what they are, if they protest today, in under 9 months, they'll be protesting again. In under 9 months, they'll be protesting again. It is just a symptom of the fundamental malaise, malignancy of the Nigerian statehood. That is it. So it's not going to achieve any meaningful long-term goals. What you need to do at this point in time is to begin to interrogate the fundamentals of Nigerian statehood. That's what you need to do.
What are these fundamentals?
The fundamental is recognizing that this is a multi-ethnic, multinational state, and you need to define in a very constructive manner how to continue the longevity of the state or what compromises you need to take.
You have an idea in mind? Are you looking at the First Republic?
Well, that's what those of restructuring are saying. But I also would like to remind you, there are those who also believe that after all these years, perhaps it will be more constructive and save life by separating the country.
Where do you stand? What do you want?
What I want?
Yes.
What I want is anything that promotes the welfare of the human contents of the Nigerian state.
Good governance.
That is what I want. Good governance, yes. But what we have is also not governance, because governance diminishes the centrality of coercion and the use of the state.
But the state has to have the instrument of coercion to maintain obedience.
The state has to have, that is where the liberal understanding of the state, that the state is a voluntary association that is formed in order to protect the welfare, to advance the welfare of the citizens.
If you remove the police, you remove the army.
No, when we talk of coercion,
yes,
we're talking of the police.
Yeah.
The police are civil. But what becomes problematic is when you constantly depend on the military to keep the state going. Once you begin to deploy the state, as the central instrument of your statehood, there's a problem.
So there's a problem in Burkina Faso. It's a military state, bro.
No, it's a military state. But
yeah, so that instrument of coercion is more vicious.
It's a diarchy. It's a diarchy.
A combination
of civilian and military.
But the military governs.
No, the military doesn't govern. If there's a diarchy, it means both the civilians and the...
Because they have a prime minister?
Yes, who is civilian.
Does that change anything when there's a compelling authority?
No. It's not a compelling authority. The government is the authority.
When there is a dictator? Where
is the dictatorship? Where you have a prime minister.
When you have the head of state?
The sole person?
Yes.
Isn't there a government? The prime minister is out there, is the person actualizing the vision.
Was Abacha a dictator?
Absolutely, yes.
Was there not a government?
A government?
Yes.
But do you want to compare the Abacha to this? You want to compare Abacha to Gaddafi? You cannot compare an Abacha to a Gaddafi. But in initial stages, Gaddafi was a dictator. But over time, he transitioned. We didn't see that with Abacha. And Gaddafi, by the way, did not see $5 billion belonging to the people in 2 years. That's the difference.
Finally, to have peace, you must prepare for war.
Yes.
You like that?
It's not whether I like it or not. It's a reality.
It's a reality.
Yes.
And war is violence.
And war is violence, yes.
So, with war, you can get peace.
No. War is not meant to advance peace. War is meant to protect if there's an offense. That's why in some military they have a defensive forces. It's not offensive. Let us distinguish between self-defense and offense.
Okay.
If you use war as an instrument of self-defense, it is I like that. But if you use war as an offensive weapon, that's a different issue altogether.
But you can invade a killer's territory.
Whose killer's territory?
America invaded Afghanistan.
America invaded Afghanistan in a very controversial manner.
At some point, Nigeria invaded Chad to deal with some militias.
No. Nigeria did not invade Chad. The Chadians came into Nigerian territory and we drove them back, if I recall well.
And you went into Chad.
Oh yeah, well, we didn't instigate the conflict.
So that's what you mean by defend.
Yes, you have to be able to defend yourself. But where you begin to turn this instrument of self-defense into instrument of intimidation internally, like we seem to be doing, that's problematic.
We've just started a discourse.
Yeah, thank you.
Professor Ademola Araoye, thank you for featuring on the part 1 of this discourse.
It's my honor. Thank you so very much.
So I've called it part 1. In part 2, we'll begin to go into the details of this book. The essence is to learn. That is the essence. The essence is to learn. The essence is to teach. So this book on Pan-Africanism is a beauty. It's a collection of thoughts by the author, Professor Araoye. He worked with the United Nations. He's a former Nigerian diplomat and retired from the United Nations as head of office for the consolidation of democratic governance of the United Nations mission in Liberia. It's a point I will raise with him in one of the interviews, because Liberia is key. I want to know what he saw. So you can get this book on udarabooks.com. I'll be giving out some in subsequent editions, so you can be one of the lucky ones to get a copy. Go on udarabooks.com and get your copy. You can also get your copy through our WhatsApp numbers. So our WhatsApp numbers are on the screen. Get your copies and then tell me what you think. The prof will always also like to get feedbacks from you. When you read your book, that is what I encourage in this class. It's a class of books. When you read a book, give the author feedback. In fact, critique some of the ideas. That is what I call intellectual discourse. And I hope you enjoy your book as you read it. I'm still reading the book, and I'm enjoying what I'm reading. I am Edmondo Pillow. Thank you for being there.